Hi everyone, welcome to the next lesson, which we're going to be concentrating on functions in this particular lesson. So just as a reminder, basically all a function is it's just a little bit of code that does a specific job. So that might be greeting a user when they come to your web page, it might be doing a print, or doing a specific calculation that's done over and over and over again. Okay, so functions are just, in short, are basically just ways in which to organize your code in a simple way. So just as a reminder, and I know we did this in the previous lesson, is to create a function, we need to put those functions in the script area of the code. Okay, so, and we can define a function by using the term function. And we can say name, and I'm going to put of function. Okay, and then you need to put normal brackets. Okay, so that is for parameters, which we'll cover shortly. And then we have our curly brackets, which is where we can place our code anywhere within there. Now, so if we do something simple like console.log, okay, and let's say we'll just say hello for the moment. Okay, okay, so we've written our function. If we want to associate that function with an action on the web page, such as clicking a button, we need to give the button itself an additional attribute, which we did previously in the lesson, which is onClick. OnClick, and then put down the name of the function, which is going to be name of function. Okay, and we need to make sure we've got brackets there, so it tells it that it is a function. And if we then save that and go to our web page that we have already open, okay, and I've already opened the console. We have our OK button. If we click that, it says hello. Okay, so that that is how you link a function to an action like a clicking of a button. Now, what we're going to do now is introduce the concept of passing parameters. So if we do start by, we're going to change the name of the function to do a calculation. So for example, we're going to give it the name calculate GST. So that's the tax that's charged on every transaction in Australia. And we'll just change it so we're still linked to the button. Now, what happens in GST, and I'm just going to pick a number. So let's say we have $1,000. And if we multiply that by the GST rate, which is 10%, so 10% can be represented in decimal 0.1, that would be the calculation for basically $1,000 for GST. So if we save that and go back to our thing, what we should get is a result of $100 or 100, which we do. So that's fine. Now the problem with that function is it's virtually not all that useful unless you're doing a calculation that happens to be $1,000 in this case. So in order to make that function more useful, what we need to do is we need to give it a parameter that we can feed into the function to be able to do. So to do that, we might put it sales amount. Okay, and so what that means is I'm effectively creating a variable, and in that variable is information that this function is expecting to see when it runs its code. So now what I'm trying to do is make the function more useful for a wider range of events. Okay, so if I then call this function, okay, and I'll do this down now so it'll run it straight away. So if I want to put console.log so we can see what it returns. Okay, so if we do that, then what we can do is we can call the function and it will display whatever the result is in the function. So we're going to put calculation GST. Now let's say instead that the sales value is $200 instead of, okay, so we're expecting a value of $20 to be displayed on the screen. So because I've put this also in script as is, it will just run as soon as I save. So if I go back to here, you can see I've got a result of $20. So what that means is I've been able to pass the call the variable and pass a parameter to, call the function and then pass the value of the sales amount to that function to be able to complete the calculation. So if you were, and in this case I've printed on the screen, but obviously if you could have, let's say a variable called GST, and you wanted to, you wanted to assign the value of the GST calculation of whatever to it, that's the way that you could do it. So you can pass this not only to a console log, but to a variable that you can use in other things. So that's basically how you pass variables. So it's pretty straightforward. Now, if you have, for example, if you're in different parts of the world, and let's say, for example, you are creating a website which is for many countries around the world, that you have GST or goods and services tax, the rate that is charged will be different from country to country. So obviously, if we wanted to make this universal for any part of the world, what we would need to do is we need to have a variable tax rate. So we could do that by adding a second variable. And so the way that you declare that variable is tax. We'll give it the tax, we'll just say rate. Okay, and so that now means that if I replace the value in there, that means that now I can adjust not only the amount but also the tax rate. So if I was calling that information, then I could say, well, it's $1,000, and if I'm in China, they call GST over there called VAT, and then the VAT is 17%. So, oops. So if I wanted to call my function and do that calculation, I can enter both values so that they then get called. So that's how you would do multiple values. So if we come back, we get $170, which makes sense of being 17% of $100. Okay, so that's basically how you can pass variables into your functions and get a result back. Now, the other way that you can also pass values back is there's another command that is used, which I think is also used in Python as well. Within functions, you can also do a return value. Okay, so let's say we want to return the value. We want to return a value, and we want to return, let's say, the sales amount. Okay, what that return value means that we're returning the value to the function. So when a function is called, okay, and we say calculate GST is called with whatever parameters in, whatever they are, if we have a return value, it's going to return back whatever is in here. So if I put in 5, it's going to return. If I put in a variable, and that variable might have been a calculated value that came out, or it could have been just a nominated value or a variable or anything like that, that return value will be returned. So if I did something like result as a variable, I'm not bothering to declare it, and GST calculations, and I had these numbers in here, okay, that value, the sales amount would be what's returned back to the result value. So if I go again, and then that value, that's what will be returned. Okay, so that's another way to get the values out. Okay, so that's pretty much how functions work. And as I said, you'll be using them a hell of a lot. So make sure that you're doing all the practice required and finishing the activities at the end of the web page. Okay, good luck, and we'll catch you in the next lesson.